specialist in the Special Education Office at the State Department of Ed. Today we have Susan Baus here with us, who is also a program specialist, and she specializes. She's actually a behavior specialist. Sorry, I didn't say that right. At the State Department in the Special Education Office. And then we have Kristen Perez Rickles, also from the State Department Special Education. She is on our SPDIG grant as a behavior specialist. And then I would like to welcome Paula Stafford, who is joining us today from NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness. I will give you a little bit background information of her. She has a bachelor's degree in elementary education and a master's degree in guidance and counseling, as well as administration. She has been a classroom teacher, a guidance counselor, and a principal. She has worked for the last 6 years for NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness. She has served as program coordinator and now as the director of affiliate relations. She is married with 2 adult children and 1 little grandchild. So welcome, Paula. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be a part of this today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I'm just going to jump right in here. I'll start sharing my screen. Oh, yes, there it is. Okay. There we go. I have had an education background and loved all of my career in education, still have incredible heart for educators and for education myself. And I think working with NAMI has given me that perfect blend of combining education with mental health, because I feel like a majority of what I do with this organization is helping people with that education piece, which is just my passion and my heart. So NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we started back in the 1979. It was a group of parents that just kind of came together and said, hey, we need to get together and try to do something to help our children who have a mental health condition and advocate for them and try to help them in some way, and other families as well. And that's kind of how it all started, was around a kitchen table somewhere. Our organization has a national office. I work at the NAMI Oklahoma State office. And then we have what we call affiliates throughout the state. And those affiliates are all volunteers. They're not paid staff. They are families that have come together and for a common cause and how to support one another. Really, everything our organization does is about one family to another, supporting one another. And so that kind of gives you the basis of, or the foundation of what the organization operates off of. So anybody that is teaching a class or facilitating a group or whatever has some lived experience with a loved one that has a mental health condition. I'm going to give a short synopsis. What we do is provide educational classes that are free, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. We provide support groups that are free, and those are ongoing. Most of those are virtual right now, by the way. I'm sure you're not surprised. And then the advocacy that we provide is really not individual advocacy. It's more on a more global level, like in the community or at the state level or that kind of a thing. So, you know, our mission is really just helping individuals and families that are affected by mental illness through support, education, and advocacy, like I just stated. So I always have to say this when I'm talking about mental illness. It is a medical condition that disrupts a person's thinking, feeling, and mood, and their ability to relate to others and their daily functioning. So I always give an analogy of, it's kind of like diabetes is a disorder of the pancreas. Mental illness is a disorder of the brain. And so sometimes we try to separate our brain from our body, but it's actually connected. And we sometimes forget that, I think. And the other thing I try to say to everybody is we all have mental health, just like we have physical health. And we're all on a continuum somewhere with our mental health, from being, just like our physical health, from being extremely healthy, somewhere in the middle, or very unhealthy. And it fluctuates sometimes too, depending on circumstances, environment, body chemistry, all kinds of things. And so if you can kind of begin to think of mental health in that way, it kind of takes away a little bit of that stigma, I feel like, that we often attach to mental illness, because nobody wants to talk about a mental illness. It's becoming more acceptable now than it has been, I think, but it has been kind of a challenge for a lot of people. The other thing I try to say is that recovery is always possible. I didn't say that you would be cured. Just like recovery from diabetes is possible, you learn how to manage it by putting all the right supports in place so that you can function in a daily life. And the same thing is true for mental illness. Um, and so mental illness is not the result of somebody, their poor character or upbringing or anything like that. And it can affect just anybody, absolutely anybody. So, okay, I'll get off my soapbox now. A few statistics just real quickly, and I'll let you look at those for yourself. And probably it doesn't surprise you, but I will say, if 1 in 5 adults experience a mental illness, think of a classroom of 20 children. If 1 in 5 have a mental illness, how many children in your classroom would have a mental illness? And you can kind of do the math and see that's quite a bit, actually, So everybody is, if you're an educator, you're dealing with this in some way, whether you know it or not, and I'm sure you know it. So another thing you might look at is just the number of people that do not receive services for their mental health. And we won't take time today. I could do a whole presentation about that too, why people don't get those services. There's a wide range of reasons, anywhere from, insurance and financial to, frankly, just the services aren't available. There's not enough services sometimes. So you might notice that as well. So let's talk about what NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, does specifically. Like I said, it's peer-led, our education classes that we offer. The first one I would mention is called Basics, and it's for families that have a child under the age of 18, really probably more under the age of 13. And it's a class that is, we meet once a week for 6 weeks, and we talk about really what is a mental illness. And while you think you know the answer to that, we kind of make it more scientific, as far as, this is what happens in the brain. And now let's move on from that, and let's talk about what are some strategies and how can we approach things differently. And that really helps families sometimes not escalate a situation with their loved one. They can learn how to de-escalate maybe a challenging situation. And so I feel like just having that educational piece is so important for families, rather than just saying, well, your child's just misbehaving, and if you would punish them more, they wouldn't act that way. That's not necessarily the case. So that's an important piece that sometimes families need information about. The next educational class is an 8-week class. It is called Family to Family. It is for families that have a loved one that's, 13 and up, or 18 and up, they say officially. And it kind of goes all the way into adulthood. And they talk a little more in depth about things that happen as the person, reaches that legal status of being considered an adult. And we do role play in this class. We talk about resources. We talk about medications in this class. We don't, try to push anybody into that, but we give them information about where to find information about it. things like that. So these classes are free to families. This class is an evidence-based practice class. Some of you will understand what that means. The basics class is on the way to being an evidence-based practice class. It just means it's been vetted as a class that really has effects to it. So we have other classes. I'm not going to bring them up today, but there are others. We also do presentations. Sometimes we do presentations. Now, we're a very small staff, let me just say that, but I have on numerous occasions gone to various schools and done presentation about mental health, different topics that they want done, depending on what they're wanting, you know, so those are kind of topical kind of presentations that we'll do sometimes. And then we do have presentations for those that are living with a mental health condition that are ready to be trained how to go out and tell their story of what happened. I mean, where were you at one place, and then what happened, and how did you get to this place, and now you're ready to be sharing with others that hope is possible and that you can be in recovery and you can be a productive citizen. It's extremely powerful when you have those kind of presentations, because they're first person presentations. They're not for young children kind of presentations. They're more for adults, but very, very powerful presentations. So in our own voice is what that's called, that particular presentation. They're public presentations, they're free, and just kind of talks about, you know, what has gone on in their life and where they're at now. And it's very exciting to see some of the success stories. So some of the peer-to-peer supports, and I know I'm talking fast, we'll give time for questions in a few minutes. Peer-to-peer support. We do offer family support groups, and of course they're free. Those family support groups are for families that want to come together for a confidential, safe place to come and share what's going on. Because sometimes you think, I'm the only one going through this, you know, that I'm the only one experiencing these kinds of things with my loved one. And sometimes it's even things that you don't want to tell anybody because you think it's unimaginable what's going on. And sometimes maybe not that much, but it's kind of like a bunch of educators getting together. You can share with other educators what's going on in that school setting and in your classroom, and it's such a different feel than if you were out at your church group trying to share that same information. It's just a different feeling, because you know they get it, because they're a fellow educator, they've walked that path, they know what it's like to get sick and not have those lesson plans ready and the panic of that, those kind of things. And so the family support groups, I tell people, it's one of our richest resources in our state, in my opinion, because sometimes you can go there and somebody can say, oh, you know what you need to do, or do you know who you need to contact? Did you know about this organization? So they have their own experiences that they can share with you. It is a positive environment because we have a structure to our support groups. The facilitators are trained. They're family members. They're not professionals. This is not a therapeutic group, but there is a training and there is a structure so that one person doesn't monopolize. Everybody gets to be heard. Problem solving happens during the group. It is not a negative or gripe session. Those things can happen outside of the group, but not during group time. So I really feel like that is something that, as educators, if you have families that have a loved one that's really struggling, and frankly, if their loved one's struggling, they're struggling with that too. So, you know, let them know that that support group is out there, that there's a safe place for them to go where they won't be judged, where they can come and be supported. And it's amazing the relief that is for families. We do have a connection recovery support group. This is for individuals 18 and older that are living with a mental health condition. It's a support group as well for those individuals, and it's led by a peer, and they have been trained. And so those are available as well. I'll talk about advocacy a little bit. Like I said, advocacy is not done individually. It's not like you can call and say, I need you to be my advocate. But it's more the kind of work that we do through our affiliates or at the state level, working with our community leaders or our state leaders in making them aware of what some of the concerns are, or what we would like to see maybe change to help those that live with a mental health condition. For example, we're really big proponents of not making our jails our mental health institutions and trying to find ways to treat those that are struggling in a different way than through the legal system. Um, so in fact, tonight we're having a meeting with some of our legislators about some of those things. And so just kind of letting them know that, there's needs out there, and sometimes, you have to change what's happening. Maybe it's not working well, or maybe it could work better. And so that's one of the advocacy things that we do. One of the things I want to make sure to mention is that NAMI is involved with the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services training, what we call CIT officers, and that stands for Crisis Intervention Team. These are police law enforcement officers that receive 40 additional hours of training in mental health. And for that, we provide an individual that has had a mental health condition with interaction with law enforcement to tell their story of what worked well, maybe what didn't work so well. Sometimes it's the first time the law enforcement has seen an individual with a mental health condition, maybe that they had interaction with during a crisis, to see that they were able to get back on their feet. We also provide a family panel. So from the family perspective, they get to share with law enforcement, what it was like from their perspective to have law enforcement engage with their loved one and get that feedback with them as well. Some resources I want to make sure and put out there for you. Of course, the crisis line. There's a crisis texting line. Many of our young people will not pick up a phone and call because they're so used to texting. So there is that texting line. Both of those two have a licensed counselor professionals on the other end to respond to them. The reach out hotline is with the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. And then I'm hoping you're aware that there's a children's mobile response system as well in the state. Kristen, are you all familiar with that?
Yes, that information has been shared with us
Okay.
through Brittany Couch, I
Okay.
believe.
Yes, perfect. Absolutely. Okay. Wanted to make sure. So that is available too. I wanted to mention this resource. It's called Fight for Mental Health. And this is where some medical doctors have done some research about what how to improve your mental health. Basically, it's a website. You can go there and they have everything there if you're struggling with sleep, to depression, anxiety, different things. They suggest different apps. They suggest different information about, a healthy diet. I mean, there's so much research out there now between, your gut health and your brain health, what you eat and how much you sleep and how that affects your mental health. That shouldn't really be a surprise, but the research is out there to show that. So that might be a good resource for a lot of people. Just got a couple of more here. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Ross Green. He has a website, Lives in the Balance. I'm going to show you some of the books that he wrote. I just cannot say enough about Dr. Green and the work he has done. A lot of it focusing on education and parents, frankly. And so, in fact, I'll just here are a picture of some of the books that he has written. The Explosive Child, certainly. Lost at School is another really good one. probably all of his books are really, really good books and great resources. Honestly, I think every educator, my bias, should read The Explosive Child, um, and have a discussion with their colleagues about that. And I think a lot of really rich dialogue could happen around that particular book. There's another book out, if you're familiar with, it's called Hope Rising, with Dr. Hillman and Casey Gwynn. Dr. Hillman is actually from Oklahoma. He has worked with many schools around the state already. And it has some really interesting information in there about that you can actually teach somebody to have hope. And he talks about the ACEs study in this book as well. So that's another resource for you. And then I just put a couple of things up here about ACEs. I mean, if you have not seen the documentary Resilience, I just, that's another one I think every educator should see. Because I think it really talks about trauma and how that affects children. And I think as we have a better understanding of why kids sometimes respond and react the way that they do, it might change our response to that and cause us to have a different response as well. So just a couple of resources for you there. I know you didn't ask me for resources, but I just can't help myself sometimes when it comes to those kinds of things.
No, I'm glad you did. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
So that's kind of NAMI in a nutshell. Like I said, it's really based on one family to another family and sharing those experiences, educating, supporting, advocating, those kinds of things. So I'm going to pause for a moment here and say, I've talked and talked. Do you have any questions?
There were a few questions that came through the chat.
Okay.
Before I ask those, I do just want to thank you so much for sharing all of that wonderful information. There was some interest in the classes and the education that you all provide. Is there or has there been or is there a way for a teacher to take one of the basics classes and complete that course, or is that strictly for families?
And that's a little bit of a tricky question, to be honest with you. So all of our classes are designed for families that have a loved one with a mental health condition. And there's a reason for that. It needs to be a safe environment. Like if I come in and I'm sharing about my family, I don't want you sitting there observing me. I'm being observed. And so it becomes not as safe of a place because you're being observed rather than you're a fellow participant. Does that make sense? And
I'm the
so,
one that asked that question, and I
yeah,
am a teacher, because I have students in my classroom, the parents are not going to go. They just, I mean, and as a teacher, I mean, I see so much trauma in these children. And so I was just thinking that would be really helpful for me to work so I could maybe talk about, because they are my loved ones. I mean, you know, I love
yes,
them dearly.
I
But if I
know.
can't, then that's fine. I mean, I can find other avenues. That's
No, so here's the second part of that answer is we can actually teach the basics class to educators, but the families can't be present while we're doing it.
okay. That's fine.
We don't mix the two. So when we're talking to educators or, you know, that's a different kind of a class and group. It's the same information, exactly the same information, but it's just different than if you have a family sitting there sharing. And yes, I listen, as a fellow educator, I get what you're saying. You love them so much. But as a parent, I'm
There's
going to tell you,
that's so much violations. Yeah.
it
I
is
just was curious.
different. It is different when you're living at 24/7. You don't get to go home. You don't get to have that break. It's different. And so, you know, it's just, that's why they do it that way. But yes, it can be offered in that way. to educators. It just won't be a combined class. Does that make sense?
That
Yeah.
is super helpful, Paula. Thank you. I think knowing that basics class where you talked a lot about the de-escalation strategies for people with mental health, I think that would be very helpful for our schools and our teachers.
I've got students that have traumatic brain injury, shaken baby syndrome. I mean, there's so much in the mental health realm that I would love to have more information on.
Yeah, and of course, there's no magic answers here. um, but yes, and sometimes it's just hearing what you know, but having it reinforced or hearing it in a different way, or having dialogue with other people that are in that class, and all of that I find to be very helpful.
All right, there is another question. Sorry, I've got to pull it up. What is the typical way that families are able to become involved in the activities that you mentioned, especially in terms of education and support? And then how could our school staff help to make those connections for families?
So, probably the best way for them to become engaged is frankly to attend one of the support groups or attend one of the educational classes. We can give you our website, our state website list when we have those classes and when they're available. They're typically taught, quite frankly, kind of on a school semester. Like usually around the January, beginning February timeframe is when one group, some classes start. And then typically during the summer, they're not taught as often because everybody's kind of on vacation and break and all of that. And then in the fall, they start up again. Sometimes those classes are taught in the summer. I mean, we've done things specifically for educators in the summer before because that's when they have time to do something like that. So I hope that's helpful. And sharing, I mean, get on our email list where we're sending out information, our newsletter, or when classes and trainings are coming up, those kinds of things. That's how you find out about when that's happening.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Paula. And I just jumped onto your website, and it looks like the best place to go is to those local affiliates pages to see when classes occur, correct?
Yes, so our classes are all done through the affiliates, honestly. We at the state office know when those are occurring. We help them with their materials and things like that. When you take one of our classes, educational classes, you walk away with a large binder of information. Sometimes when families are coming to those classes, they come to us when they're more in crisis, honestly. And so there is a lot of reading that occurs during this class, not from the participants, but from the educators. I'm going to carefully say, I'm not sure it's the best adult education method, but when you understand why it's done the way it is, it's not that they really gain all of that information. It's that they're coming to a safe place. They're getting knowledge. They have it to take home with them to look back at it when they need it. We've had people that have gone through the classes more than once and said, the first time I went, I didn't really hear all that because they were in that crisis state at the time. And that's okay, So I don't know if that's helpful either, but they get a lot of resources through the class as well.
That made sense. Thank you for that response.
Yeah. Were there other questions?
I had asked about do we get a copy? Can you email me the PowerPoint that you have, that you've
Yes,
used? Because it's got all the resources and stuff in it. Because I was like writing it down, but I don't think I wrote everything down. I would appreciate it if you could send it to me.
Yeah, Paula, if you send it to Kristen Coleman,
I will.
I know you have her email. She can send it out to all of the participants, and then we can post it with the video, if you are comfortable with that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Were there any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Coleman.
Oh, I was just going to say that those of you that did attend our webinar today, it will also be recorded and put on our State Department website under news and memos on the special education site. If you want to share with others in your district or other teacher friends that you may have that might find it beneficial. That was it.
So some of the questions, some of the other things that we had kind of talked about mentioning today, about, I mean, I think the schools have done so much work on trauma training and educating educators about that. And I just jump up and down with excitement. I attended that It Starts Here conference here a while back, and things like that. So I certainly applaud the work that the Department of Education is doing on behalf of all of that kind of training. One of the things, and I'm going to speak as both an educator and as a parent for a moment and say that one of the things I would say to educators that you could really do um, to improve things even more is really go that extra mile to support families. And when their child is misbehaving or in crisis in some way, that's personal to them. And they feel guilty and embarrassed, and they don't know what to do to make change either sometimes. And so I don't think you can say too often, hey, tomorrow's a fresh day. We got a fresh start. We're in this together. Those families need as much support, I think, as the child that is struggling. And so if that would be one thing I would say, really to try to figure out ways to truly come alongside those families. They want the same thing you do. They want their child to achieve and do well. And so remembering that, because I think it's real easy to contact a parent and just say, well, Johnny really misbehaved today and they did this and this and this. But they're like, okay, what do you want me to do? I've tried everything I know to do. I'm having the same struggles, you know? So, I mean, coming alongside them and really, really letting them know that you understand that they're really trying and they're working hard and they need to feel your support for them personally, as well as for their child. That would be probably a golden nugget I would pass along. And I know that's something you know, but I still think it's worth mentioning.
Thank you for that, Paula. That made me think of one of my favorite phrases of partnership over power. Just, I like how you phrased it as coming alongside and truly developing that relationship and partnership with families.
Yeah, I have a little thing in my office, relationship, relationship, relationship. It's just so important.
I agree.
All right. Well,
Do
are
we
there
have any other- any
are
other
there any other
questions?
questions? All right. So we will send out the PowerPoint from Paula once we get it to the emails that you used when you registered for today's webinar. If you do not receive that for whatever reason, please feel free to email Kristen Coleman or myself. I put the emails in the chat box and we will make sure that that gets sent out to you. And then this PowerPoint will also, the entire video, the entire discussion will be posted onto the State Department of Education Special Education Services website. So feel free to rewatch it, share it with other interested parties, make sure your teacher team has seen it and watched it with you. And we really appreciate your participation today.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you so much. And feel free to reach out to me at our NAMI state office as well. We get all kinds of phone calls from families and wanting to know about resources and things like that. And we try to help them with that. And sometimes even just being that listening ear that they don't always get somewhere, just being able to tell what their concern is helpful. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. I know the last few years, well, up until last year, a group of us from the State Department in our office, we would volunteer at your NAMI walk that you would have. But then last year, I believe it was COVID, so we didn't get to do it. But we love it. So we love doing that so much on that Saturday. So it's fun.
That's great. We're actually doing a virtual walk this year.
Oh, are you?
Yes,
Yeah.
we are.
Good,
So
When is
good.
the date for the virtual walk?
it is May 22nd, and I'll make sure you all have that information as well.
Okay,
Very
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay,
Feel
I
free
guess
to
that
reach
will-
out anytime.
all right. Thank you so much.